So now I'm going to have Deb Pettish start with her presentation, and she's going to share her screen and go over the Title I program. Thank you, Deb.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Marisa. And I just want to give huge kudos to you, Marisa, and your team, Mona and Kate and Charlotte. You have been a pleasure to work with, talking about Title I and having us all kind of learn together. And I can just hear in your voices when we talk about this, how much you really want to support students and involve families in this process. So thank you. So as Marisa said, I'm Debbie Pettish. I've been in the district for like 11 years. Most of my time here has been at sites, either high school or middle school sites. Right now, I'm the executive director of curriculum and instruction, and also in charge of the Title I programs throughout the district. Excuse me. So I'm going to share my screen in a second and give you some probably kind of boring information. So please bear with me, because we really do want to give you as many details, even if they're not that exciting. But we really, really, really appreciate that all of you are here this evening, taking times out of your busy schedules in order to really learn more about how Iron Horse can support your individual student. And because this really, really, truly is a partnership between the district, the site, and the parent and the student. So thank you so much for being here. And hopefully, if you're kind of sitting there thinking, why am I here exactly? What is this? Like, you're in the right place. Like, we're going to explain everything to you. So let me go ahead and share my screen. All right. Okay. Full screen. There we go. All right. So again, why are you here? And I'm going to kind of start us off, and this is kind of the purpose of my portion of the presentation. And then Marisa has another portion that her and her team are going to go over. But essentially, we wanted to really provide you with a large overview. What is Title I? Some of you have probably heard of it. Some of you haven't. Even if you have heard of it, you might think it's something that it is or it isn't. So, because I do find that over the years, there are a lot of misconceptions about what Title I is and what Title I isn't. And so hopefully we can clear those up for you today. Going to talk a little bit about how families will engage in this process and how important it is for you to be involved in your child's education. That, I have a feeling you already know that. That's why you're here today. But we really want to engage you and bring you in as much as possible so that we can support you, you can support us in supporting your child. And then specifically to discuss the supports that Iron Horse Middle School will have this year. So I really want to be clear about what Title I is. And so Title I ensures that all children have fair, equal, and significant opportunity to obtain a high quality education. And it's really, really important. Really, the ultimate goal is that we support all students in, at the very least, being proficient on state academic standards. Okay, so I really want, some people think it's, I can request this, or I can ask for that, or I need this, or we should be doing that. And those are all things that, you know, like we want to hear, but really we also have to keep in mind that the ultimate goal is to ensure every student is learning at grade level in their academic courses. So it is a federally funded program that is overseen, excuse me, by the state of California, but we do get funding from the federal government in order to support this program. And they have very, very strict rules about who qualifies and how funds can be spent. And so if you're thinking, you know, my child went to Iron Horse last year and I'm not sure if we had this meeting, or, you know, I haven't really heard about this before. It's because over the summer, we worked very closely with the state, And we really wanted to kind of ramp up the way that we implement our Title I programs. And one way that we want to do that is really to increase the engagement of our families. And so that's why we're here today, whereas you probably weren't here last year for a meeting like this, is my guess. At least most schools didn't. So, and this is getting a little nitpicky, but I think it's really, really important, because there's a big difference between a targeted assistance Title I school and a school-wide program. Most of the schools throughout the country who receive Title I funding do so through something called a school-wide program. That means at least 40% of students in school qualify for Title I services. This does not apply to any of our 35 schools. Okay, so it's important, because what I found many different times is when I talk sometimes to parents or staff, they say, oh, this other school is doing, fill in the blank program. Well, whenever I do my research, it's because they have a school-wide Title I program, and they usually get a ton more money, and there's much different parameters. Okay, so if you have relatives that might go to Title I school, just remember that Iron Horse, excuse me, and all of our other schools who qualify for Title I services in the district, and there are 11 elementary schools who are targeted assistance Title I, and there are 3 middle schools who qualify for targeted assistance Title I. And that means that there's less than 40% of students at any given school who qualify for Title I services. And again, the funds have to be used much differently than in SWP. And this is a guideline that I really give the principals, but I like the parents to hear too. Again, the activity, the expenditure is aligned to meet the academic content standards. So we have to keep that in mind, because over the course of the year or the next, 3 years, if your child is in 6th grade, we, especially Iron Horse, principal and assistant principals, will be asking for your feedback on how you want to spend the Title I money. So it's important to really keep in mind that the activity, whatever we're spending that money on, has to support the student in meeting the content standards for their grade level. And that it has to supplement and not supplant. And so that's a really, really big one. And that essentially, of course, means that if the school district's already providing something, then Marissa can't say, oh, instead of the district providing, I'll just pay with Title I. It has to be the district's providing this floor of education for students, and this Title I fund has to be like on top of that and specifically used for students who qualify for Title I services. Okay, so everybody gets this floor of opportunity offered by SRVUSD at our schools. And then Title I money has to be spent on things that are above and beyond that, and that are specifically for students who qualify for Title I services. So how do students qualify? This is a bit of a change too than in years past, and this is really best practice according to the state. So we determine students at the beginning of the school year. Okay, and we say, and I'll tell you how students qualify, I think on the next slide. But essentially, we put a group of students and we say, you qualify for Title I services. And this is not something that we share widely. It's not something that would ever be like released to colleges and universities or anything like that. It's just something that Marissa and very, very tight members of her team are going to know that this group of students qualify for extra support. And it's just these students, and they qualify for the whole year. And then, but it doesn't mean that they'll be receiving services the whole year. Okay, and we'll get more into that later in the presentation as well. It just means that we have this group, we know they qualify, then we have to determine how to spend the money. It's not a ton of money. I'll tell you that in a second too. But we have to determine alongside you, how we want to best spend the money to support the highest number of students. Okay. And there's some restraints on the money for this year, but going forward, parents will have more voice and choice in how we're spending the money. So let's say, a lot of schools use Title I money to support students in maybe after school interventions. So they pay teachers to come in after school. They pay teachers to plan these interventions, and maybe the student is with them for 6 weeks to work on math, whatever. And then maybe after that 6 weeks, that student is doing so well that they're out of that intervention, maybe for the rest of the year or for the next 6 months until again, they're deemed appropriate for another intervention, and then they go in that. So again, students can come in and come out of the services that Iron Horse is going to be offering. So the eligibility criteria, sorry, that's usually a live link. Okay, here you go. So initially students qualify if they have to kind of fit in 2 different categories. So the first one is students who are potentially either economically disadvantaged or have an IEP, a 504, are a migrant, or are an English language learner. So we kind of put all those students into one category, and then we say, okay, all of these students, now, which of these students are struggling in school according to these pretty specific guidelines? So if you scroll down to grades 6 through 8, what we're looking for, again, is a student who falls into one or more of these categories, but also is maybe struggling in one subject or multiple subjects. So we have assessments that we give 3 times a year. You may have heard of them, the FastBridge assessment. So that's just an internal assessment we use to see which students might need a little bit more support to get up to grade level. Last year was the first year in 3 years we've had CASP. So we're also looking at CASP scores, maybe students who struggled on that. And then students who also received a D or an F on their previous year's report card in ELA or in math. So you might be sitting there saying, oh, this is wonderful, I love this. Or you might be sitting there saying, I'm not sure my student, my child, and I have a first grader at Green Valley, and so who alternates between loving school, hating school, doing well, and kind of struggling. Like ultimately, you're our partners in education. We trust you to make the best decisions for your student, and hopefully take into consideration what Marisa and her team, including her counselors, feel is best for your child. And so if you kind of go through this presentation and decide that like the supports in here are probably just not appropriate at this time, that's something that you can have a conversation with the counselor about. This is nothing that we want to force. Of course, we feel as a district and as a site that providing additional supports to students in order to get them up to grade level is what's best for individual kids. But I just want to put that out there. And so what Marisa and her team will do is they must review on an ongoing basis how students are doing. So let's say a student is in that study skills class over a period of time. They're looking at that student's progress, ideally seeing growth. And maybe if they're not seeing growth, they're thinking about some other strategies that they can be using in order to support that individual student in getting up to grade level. And I know Marisa is going to talk a lot more about this, but there is a family engagement policy and a compact that is embedded in that policy. So the policy is kind of what you think it would be. It's like the school is going to do these things to support your child. We're asking as a parent that you do these things. And then that we're asking as a student, especially middle school students, that they have a lot of responsibilities when it comes to their learning. And so there's a compact that you're basically agreeing to do, certain things like, homework at night or reading with your child or whatever it may be. But it essentially explains the responsibilities of each party, and that we do ask families to sign that so that they kind of know what they should be doing in order to support their child. The school agrees to be doing certain things to support your children, and then the child agrees to be doing certain things. And so I'll tell you that, and it's not a ton of money. There are some other schools, even in our county, that get hundreds and hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, but we don't have super high percentage of Title I students. And so Iron Horse gets almost $40,000 for this particular school year. I know that they had already decided, I'm going to let Marissa really talk about the details here, to create like a study skills support class. And then there is some room for some additional supports that money could also be providing. So I am going to stop sharing. And I am going to turn it over to Marissa, but I will stay on. I do have a board meeting that I have to speak at that I have to leave by about 6:50, but I will turn over to Marissa.
Okay, so hopefully everybody can hear me. Can everyone see the screen? Can you let me know one? Okay, great. So as Deb said, we're talking about Title I here at Iron Horse and what it is that we want to be able to do here at Iron Horse.
Hey, Marissa, we have a question in the chat.
I can try to answer them.
Okay.
If you want in the chat, if that would be helpful.
Okay, yeah. If you can put the response in there, Deb is going to respond to the question about how a student qualifies. And so I'm going to go on to what we really want to accomplish here at this meeting. Now that you know how that your student is eligible for whatever programs we put together with these funds, I want us to collaborate and think about what types of supports that you think your child would most benefit from, whether they be academic supports, short-term like intervention classes for 6 weeks before or after school, maybe supports that help kids after school with their classwork, maybe social emotional supports like counseling, or workshops for students or their families to help them deal with whatever issues are coming up, or even executive functioning skills supports like workshops for students or families to help their kids with their organization and, study skills, or like study skills class, which is something that we currently have. So I'm wondering how people, or what people think would be something that is of interest. So you can put in the chat things that you think you would be interested in seeing your student benefit from by supports here. The other way that I would really like people to provide their feedback is to fill out this Google form, because then I have all the information compiled in one place. And if you fill out this Google form, or use the QR code, scan it, or type in the bit.ly, I think it's easier. But I'm also going to send this presentation out so that you can see it and give your feedback. I want to know what you think would be most beneficial for your child. And I also want to know what kinds of things you want in the agreements for our family engagement policy and our compact. What should we agree upon that we are all going to do to ensure that students find the most success? So that is what I would like to happen. We are going to be partners in this, and I really want us to create a family engagement policy and a compact that is inclusive of your input. So it's important that you fill out the form that I have there, the bit.ly. I'm going to go back really quickly because I'm thinking, I don't know if I can highlight it. I can't highlight it, but we can probably put the bit.ly in the chat if someone can look that up so that people can log on. The next thing that I want us to do is really understand the purpose of that engagement policy. We really want to make sure that we nurture this partnership so that we are working together to decide what is going to be offered. And we're going to make sure that we notify the policy, as Deb said, notify families about the policy, because we will be mailing it out once we have finalized it. And that, it's available for you to see. It will be up on our website. And it will be updated on a regular basis, as she said, as needed. So now is the time where we have questions, but I told you that at this point is when I have people sharing is when I would stop the recording. So give me a chance to stop recording. And that's going to take me a minute because I don't know how. I think I can stop the recording. Do you have any idea how I stop this recording, Kate?
Yeah, so at the bottom, there should be wherever you went to record, you click and it'll unrecord it.